Well, hello, and let's get started with week one. We're going to be talking about Escobar's article, talking about dialogue and deliberation. So let me start with a situation that may feel familiar. Your agency's just experienced a controversial use of force incident. A video is circulating, community groups are mobilizing, elected officials are asking questions. You schedule what you're going to call a community dialogue, a community meeting. The room is full, emotions are high. Within 15 minutes, someone demands a policy change, and another person accuses the department of systemic bias. An officer in the back row is sitting there with his arms folded. You can feel the temperature rising. You try to explain investigative timelines. Someone says you're deflecting. Another one says the outcome's already predetermined. And afterwards, your team says that dialogue didn't work. Was that actually dialogue, or was it decision-making under pressure? That's the distinction, is the foundation of Oliver Escobar's framework and the opening section of his work on public dialogue and deliberation. Escobar argues that many engagement failures are not public failures, they are design failures. Think about that. Dialogue is about learning, inquiry, and relationship building. Deliberation is about weighing options and making decisions. A very distinct and different objective. If a community expects dialogue but feels immediate decision pressure, trust erodes. If leadership needs deliberation but invites open-ended dialogue, frustration builds. The process collapses not because people are unreasonable, but because expectations and structure are misaligned. For public safety leaders, that's an issue. It affects legitimacy, it affects credibility, and it shapes whether future engagement becomes easier or harder. So we move into this framework consideration. In moments of operational stress, we are clear about what kind of communications we are designing. Because when we confuse dialogue and deliberation, we don't just weaken a meeting, we weaken institutional trust. And that's where Escobar begins. Escobar challenges a very common assumption. Engagement is not the same thing as talking. Holding a meeting is not the same as engaging the public. And inviting people into a room does not automatically create dialogue. When agencies mislabel communication, when everything gets called dialogue, we are designing the wrong process for outcomes we actually want. And once the design's wrong, failure isn't surprising. It's predictable. Escobar argues that dialogue has become a buzzword. It's overused, it's poorly defined, and it is often misapplied. We use it to describe public meetings, listening sessions, task force, and sometimes even press briefings. The problem isn't the word itself. The problem is what happens next. Participants arrive with expectation the process just cannot meet. And that gap between expectation and reality is where frustration and distrust often begins. This slide is the foundation for everything else. Dialogue and deliberation are related, but they're not the same. Dialogue is about learning, inquiry, and relationship building. Deliberation is about weighing options, making decisions, and managing trade-offs. Escobar is very clear in this regard. Dialogue does not make decisions. Deliberation does. Dialogue prepares people to deliberate well later. So I want you to take a moment and think about that. Dialogue does not make decisions. Deliberation does, and dialogue prepares people to deliberate later. When we confuse the two, we put people in the wrong kind of conversation. That being said, Dialogue is fragile. It collapses the moment decision pressure enters too early. Common killers include early decision mandates, advocacy too soon, winner-loser framing. And we'll talk about framing later in the session, but winner-loser framing is killing it right from the get-go and having hidden agendas. Here's the key dynamic Escobar highlights. Once people believe they need to defend a position, curiosity disappears. Inquiry stops. Advocacy takes over, and we start to dig in. And what we call dialogue quickly returns into debate. Escobar reframes dialogue as relational work, not discussion. Dialogue requires openness to bring wrong, suspension of certainty, and mutual recognition. This is not easy, especially in public safety cultures that reward confidence, authority, and decisiveness. Think about that. We tend to be in the public safety world very much about being decisive and moving things forward and making decisions, not about building that dialogue or relation. Dialogue asks leaders to do something even harder, to manage uncertainty instead of eliminating it. That discomfort is not a flaw. It's part of the work. So think about this. Safety itself is not structural, not necessarily. Let's talk about psychological safety, and that doesn't happen by accident. It's by design. Ground rules matter. Facilitation matters. Power dynamics do not disappear just because we invite people into a room. When participants feel threatened emotionally, socially, or politically, folks, they disengage. That's not weakness. That's just pure rational human behavior. Poor engagement design often produces silence, not trust. Escobar reminds us that language is never neutral. Words carry ideology. Framing always comes before understanding. That's why dialogue often begins by unpacking language and building shared vocabulary. If people mean different things by the same words, they are not having the same conversation, even if they're sitting at the same table. This is where practitioner instincts often push back. Dialogue's not about consensus, it's not about forcing agreement, and it's certainly not about premature closure. Learning comes first. Decision-making comes later. When we rush to resolution, we shut down inquiry and we undermine trust. Dialogue creates conditions that make good decisions possible later. And I know I reinforced this many times, but the dialogue is the foundation to the decision-making process. For public safety leaders, this matters deeply. Trust must come before legitimacy. Dialogue enables deliberation. It does not replace it. And when engagement is poorly designed, what looks like resistance is often just a rational response to being placed in the wrong kind of conversation. And that's not a public problem, folks. That's a design problem. So here's the question I want you to sit with, and we'll speak more about this later in the session. What type of communication do we say we're using, and what are we actually practicing? The gap shapes everything that follows. In our future activity in class, you'll apply Escobar's framework to your own agency experience. We'll identify mismatches between intent and design and consider what kind of communications was actually needed. Dialogue first, deliberation later. That sequence matters. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the live session.